Call the school committee meeting to order. Any public comments? Hearing none, we will move to the review of minutes of the meeting of March 14th. I will entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of March 14th.
I make so moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay, approved, I should say. All right, Dr. Seidel, you're up with alternative education plans.
So Jim asked me to share. I mentioned that I was going to a meeting with other districts. So a few years ago, DESE wanted different districts to pilot, and Burlington was one of those pilots. And I talked to the assistant superintendent, and so they set out project-based items during their pilot. After the pilot, they got feedback. They decided not to continue. But I just talked to him last month, and now Burlington is looking at their plan at moving forward. Two other districts that now have things in place are Wakefield and North Middlesex. Wakefield calls it Learn Anywhere, and North Middlesex calls it Extended Learning. And their idea is to take things that are happening within the classroom and try to extend that learning when there's a snow day. So they're very much into the flipped classroom, where teachers are making different things online that kids can watch at home and then have an activity with that. And some of the districts are looking at having a window, because some of the feedback they got from parents was on a snow day, they want their kids outside playing in the snow and having fun. So some of the districts have a longer window to get the work done and bring it back, and they've assigned different tasks to teachers, to nurses, to paras, so everybody has something to do on those days off. Even paras can go to professional development before or after school. And so they have that, and Melrose now did a pilot from February to April on the same type of thing that Wakefield did. So it's usually something that's connected, so high school teachers need to do something that's connected in their class. As you move down the grades, it doesn't have to be in every subject. It could be projects that are science-based or social studies-based. It just depends on what learning is happening and what they would like the kids to do. But all of them have a window of time for kids to get it done. If they don't have the support at home, then they can do it after school or before school with support from professionals in the building.
So you got a lot of stuff there. Let me ask you a few pieces.
Okay.
When you say extend a window, so it's within that day?
No. So for instance, I'm going to get to Westford is doing Saturdays, and I believe they have a week and a half within a window of that Saturday to get things done.
For that particular
For
study.
that particular project.
Even if they may be going back to school in that time?
Correct. And some of the districts have office hours. So the day of the snow day, teachers post when they'll be available to either talk to students either by phone or online. And they post that for each grade level so that people know when teachers are available. You have 4 districts, Chelmsford, Lexington, Billerica, and Westford, that now have put in plans in the last couple weeks to bring their snow day back to the 22nd. And they're all very different. So Westford is doing 3 Saturdays. Chelmsford is adding 35 minutes every day till the end of the school year to get back 5 days. Billerica has 3 half days that they're making full day, and then an hour for the next 8 Tuesdays to make up 3 days. And Lexington is another one. I couldn't get the particulars, but they're also putting things into place. But Wakefield and North Middlesex have programs in place before this year. Middlesex put theirs in January.
Were each of these individually approved by the state, or are these part of a templated plan that you can pick from above?
So DESE doesn't have to, it's up to each school committee to approve their local program, and then DESE audits what's happening in each school district. Is that your understanding, Jim? That's mine.
Yes, it's up to each locality, makes their own decisions in line with the guidelines, but DESE's oversight or accountability. They really don't have a process for that as of right now. So they referred it back to the locality, but there's no
Right.
oversight.
The second and third districts are just adding hours, they're not adding days.
Correct, so both
So how are they
Chelmsford
meeting the 180?
and Billerica.
So there's a process where you could apply for a waiver, and you could come up with a plan, you apply for the waiver, and based upon your plan and the hours, they might allow you to make up 5 hours, might account for a day, or something along those lines.
Mhm.
So I know Billerica received their waiver, and I've heard from someone in Chelmsford that they received theirs as well.
Chelmsford also added half a day on Good Friday.
Mhm.
Which they had Good Friday off previously. How do they get away with that? I suppose we're not supposed to recognize.
All I know is they
religious
send
holidays.
emails out and ask the school community to vote.
Based on
Yeah.
attendance.
Matt, do you have anything to add from your district, President?
We're ending on Monday, I think it's the 27th. The
25th.
25th is
Where the 27th.
where we are, we landed on the calendar. And we have very similar holidays off that Carlisle does. And there is a discussion about the start time. But yeah, it's a hot topic for sure.
I mean, you only need one day. You only have to claw back one day to end. That's the goal, is the
For the
Friday the
districts,
22nd. is
for the
what
districts
those-
that added, they were trying to go back to the Friday.
Right. Yeah. And did you find this out by talking to your peers?
Yes.
And were there any union issues with the teachers involved?
So for Westford,
Yeah.
the teachers actually came to the administration. North Middlesex had some issues that they had to work through
Yeah.
because they thought that North Middlesex had been planning all fall, and then they went to the school committee, I believe, in January. And they thought they had agreement, and then after the fact, they had to go back and do some work. But other districts did not have issues with the union.
So the requirement that you reported on for Blizzard Pack was pretty stringent, like a certain percentage of the students had to all be online at the same time and a certain number of the grades. That seems to have gone away.
They have to complete the work, so the percent of work that has to be done has a percentage of the students who have to complete it within whatever time frame, whether it's whatever time frame that the district decides to
But
give
it's
the
not
window.
that day, the day of the snow day, which was my impression of what you said.
Right, some are and some are not.
Right, because with snow days, there's always the chance that there's no power anyway, right? So that would
Correct.
render that moot, right? Okay.
So the guidelines that they laid out early in the year, that everybody looked at, were very stringent.
Yes.
After this past winter, and after all the proposals that the
Right.
state's heard, it seems like districts are interpreting those guidelines differently, and we're understanding that the state oversight
Right.
and the accountability
Right.
doesn't seem to be as stringent as it was first put out there.
Yeah.
So our thoughts moving forward are, I think this year is what this year is. I've met with a number of superintendents. Some of them are rearranging, some of them, this is where we are. We've made plans. I know our faculty, anyone that had a conflict, we put the word out for them to contact me if they had a conflict with the last week. I think I had 3 people contact me. So we're not looking at large faculty absences that week, but I do think this would be a summer, we've talked a lot about summer projects. This
Yeah.
would be a summer project for us to have a plan in place
Right, that's perfect.
for next year, if we need it, and we may need it on snow day 1 or 2, or maybe snow day 4 or 5, but for us to have a well-thought-out plan of implementation with our teachers on board, with the families aware of what that's going to look like, and with everybody understanding how that process is going to work.
And now we have many models to
Right.
actually look at and see
Yeah.
how they delineate.
You indicated that DESI would need to audit, and what exactly do you think they would audit and how would they?
They don't even have,
I will not say that DESI needs to audit. The questions, as I heard stories of other districts, I would contact the DESI to see, is this true and how is this going to work? And they said they'd leave it up to the locality, and hopefully they will make their program align with the guidelines. And at this stage, there isn't a plan for oversight. So it's not that we would just create anything willy-nilly. We would create a
No, I'm sure
program in
we'll
line with
create it, but the
guidelines.
question is what is auditable, weeks or months after the fact? You
I
go
think
back-
some thought should be given to how many of the snow days should be these kinds of days, because.
Absolutely.
um,
Right, I think, as Jim alluded, right, you'd probably have to preset. If we go into a calendar with 5, with 5,
So the 6th day would
well,
probably.
no, you don't want to wait till the 6th day. I think you probably want to start figuring it out at the 3rd or 4th day, right?
I think that's
Depending on when
something,
it is in
Yeah.
the calendar.
I think we'd make a protocol with,
Right.
during the summer, if it's a 2-day storm, do we know that we'll use one of those days as a,
Right.
I'm gonna start using the jargon, as a blizzard bag day or an alternative education day, and then we'll take one and we'll use one as an alternative day. But I think it'd be good to have a plan for how we'd address those
Right.
in advance, and then as the days come, we would make.
So I interpret what you're saying, both of you, that the preference, at least now, for this district would be to go after these alternative education metrics as opposed to the Chelmsford, Westford model of contingency extension of school, makeup time, I guess, as well.
So we're talking about next year?
Yeah.
We're not, so
No, I'm not saying for this year. I'm saying in your planning,
in the planning, it would
one
be.
option is to have this alternative, the other option is to say, okay, this is the way we'll extend the school.
The makeup model kicks in this year if you apply for the waiver based on the weather conditions we've had this year. You can apply for the waiver,
Right.
and then depending on how many days, depending on what your start date was, the DSE will make a determination whether they give you
Right.
the opportunity.
Let me try
extend
again,
the day.
Jim. To have a strategy in place. The
Yes.
strategy is either it could be a combination, but we're going to approach the alternative education model to utilize days that are otherwise snow days, and/or when we reach some threshold, we have consensus that we'll take, 35 more minutes, or we'll use this day. I mean, it's always good to pre-plan.
But 35-minute is not, no, what I'm saying is that is not an opportunity. Right now, the state has the alternative
Right.
learning. If you have a snow day, you can do
Right. So you're
that.
saying
But the
From a
extending the day
strategy-
or the Saturday school is not granted automatically by the state.
No, but from a strategy standpoint, you're implying that it will not again be granted, that...
What
Maybe
he's
we want to try, I'm not having my...
But if you look at the DSE requirements,
I'm sorry.
I think Melissa mentioned this too, it's staying with the 180 days. Right, that is the preference of DESE, is that you would, right, you're not
You have
adding
180 real
hours,
days.
you're doing
Even if one of
something.
those days, it's conversion
Right,
based.
that is the requirement that DESE put out, but then you could get a waiver, but that wouldn't be our plan. Our plan would be within the 180 days and planning something
Okay, got it.
from that.
All right,
I mean, it also depends on what kind of weather patterns.
Right.
that's
you
what
have.
he's saying, but I'm saying, I was saying, to
Assuming
pre-plan
we
your
had a
approach.
bad weather year,
Well, that's why you...
is what you're asking. Yeah.
So to restate, we're not going to do anything different this year. Next year, the preference would be, if we saw ourselves having a lot of snow days, to put in place a plan that allowed us to continue with a 180-day program that didn't require a waiver. What work do we need to do now or before next winter to prepare for that? What decisions do we need to make?
So that's what we need to do in the summer. There'd be a lot of planning with teachers, and then communicating out to the families how this work is going to be done, what it's going to look like, and what people's responsibilities are going to be when we...
And it sounds like it has to come here.
Yes.
Yes, so we'd have to develop it in the summertime and then bring it to the school committee for approval.
So when should we plan on receiving that information, that proposal?
Probably in September.
Okay, we'll note it on the calendar.
Yes, sir. So noted.
That's great.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, Ms. Wilson, another short timer stepping up to the podium. Along with my esteemed colleague here in the West.
I have a ways to go still, so.
Thank God.
So we're very appreciative.
Yeah. So what we tried to do this month is to just give us a chance to share with you the update and the indicators of progress for this year's school improvement plan. And then we'll come back in May, or I'll come back in May. And we'll talk about the goals and the action steps for the new school improvement plan that will go into effect for fall. So we're going to try to speed that process up
Oh,
so that
good.
we're going into summer with our goals and our objectives ready for fall, which I think Matt's happy about too, probably because he doesn't have to do that. So I'll try to just highlight some of the bigger ones rather than go through every single bullet that's on our indicators of progress. Professional learning, as you know, is a very important thing to us here at school. I think the staff and faculty really feel like those afternoons and those days that we can get together are so beneficial in terms of helping us improve our instruction. So every year, at the end of the year, we do a follow-up survey to staff in June, usually of the year, just to get more evidence, some feedback, and think about what our professional development is going to look like in the fall. You know, are there things that we've found out about this year that we want to take into the next year? So that'll be happening shortly. We'll evaluate our offerings again, same thing, and develop our topics then for September, starting in September on our early release days. We've tried really hard this year to send out little blurbs about what the faculty is doing on those early release days so that parents have an idea of what we're studying and what we're trying to do, so we have a little more outreach with that. And particularly keep the idea of innovation and supporting the district strategies and goals as our sort of foremost vision. The faculty goals then, in terms of evaluation, we're coming into the busy, never typed so much in my life in the last 3 weeks. The evaluation goals are due in May for our teachers who are not on professional status. They're due in April, which is a culminating goal-setting conference, as well as a lot of documentation of the work that they've done this year. And that's coming up. As we talk about those goals this year, and how everything's gone, we're going to take a look at starting their goal setting for next fall earlier this year too. We usually wait until the conversation starts in September and October. And this year what we'd like them to be thinking about are some things that might continue over from this year or that might be sort of in place then that they can work on over the summer. Not losing any time.
That's good.
With that too. MCAS, we're in the middle of that. Grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 have finished their ELA piece of MCAS as of today. Then it has a few more things coming in the next couple of weeks. That's going incredibly smoothly. This is our 4th year on the computer. Nancy's been amazing. It's been, building the plane in the air in some cases, I think, but I think we've done really well. We walked in with a student. I have to share this because I'm still laughing about that. We walked in the building this morning with an 8th grade student. I said, "So how was yesterday's MCAS?" And I expected the usual, like, I had all this writing to do. And he said, "It was so much fun." And I stopped and I said, "That's awesome." I said, "Did you hear that, Mrs. Anderson? This was really fun." So I guess he really enjoyed writing his essays. Good. I'm thrilled with that.
Awesome, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I hope he wrote what he was supposed to write. Then again, too, in terms of our scheduling and the practice tests and so on, every year there are changes, and so we try to keep on top of preparing our kids, but not totally, by any means stressing them out or making a large, like some school systems will run practice exams and support groups and all that sort of thing. We really truly believe that we're getting at what we need to for the MCAS in the classroom. So that seems to be working pretty well. Communication survey, we spent a lot of time in our school advisory committee this year looking at communication out to the public. How our survey was created and distributed is to be commended to Melinda, who helped us an awful lot with our results and the summary that came back from our survey that we put out in December. We've taken a long, hard look at that data, shared it with all of our faculty teams. We've shared it with parents. We've shared out a little bit with you in the last couple of months when we came in and did our brief overview at the beginning of the data. And what's coming out of that is going to be obviously some goals for next year, to look at a subcommittee of the SAC group to continue to take a look at our whole sort of infrastructure and how the tech piece matches with what we want to do with the communication part, and then how are we really making sure that everybody's getting what they need in a succinct and smooth manner.
Right.
So that's
So the,
that.
Carrie, the timeline here is that the survey went out in fall, and we discussed it in February, I assume it was our February meeting.
Correct.
And now,
Yeah.
not, what has to happen, what's happening between February and June before
So
it's rolled
between
out?
February and June, we're looking at putting those action steps into the next year's school improvement plan
Okay.
and sharing out with faculty sort of the expectations for their communication out to you. I think there's some people that are already in a pretty good place with that, so we want to try to talk about that in our team meetings to strengthen
Will you
what's going on.
then report out to the parents in particular, I'm thinking that families that, okay, survey said this is what we're doing kind of thing?
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, okay.
Literacy's been an ongoing, obviously, action step, and again, I just remind folks that even though things may not appear on the school improvement plan that have been on previous improvement plans, it doesn't mean that we don't do any consideration of those, like technology is woven throughout. Some of our bullet points from years past are still very much in our forefront, but these are specific areas that we felt we really wanted to focus on this year. So we've been looking a lot in terms of literacy with Tier 2 intervention work at grades, particularly the grades 6 through 8. This is still a work in progress. We have a few things in place. LLI is level literacy intervention for students who are not necessarily special needs students, but who, it's Fountas and Pinnell, Leslie College, University now, right? Leslie University, program that sort of helps raise reading levels in a very short, intense period of time. And we've been using that with a couple of our students, and it's an amazing program. And so that's in place, that's new for us. We're fine-tuning some of our math Tier 2 work just to be sure that we have data that kind of charts and takes a look at the protocols for selecting students for Tier 2 intervention work. And then that's been another piece of our conversation. We've been adjusting some of the instructional approaches for students in all grades, K to 7 and 8, who have been determined through their benchmark assessment system reading scores or through other reading studies. We've been looking at how we've been adjusting information in the classroom too, so it's impacted instructional practice a bit. The level of literacy intervention, again, has been offered for those students in the middle level that we've identified through that benchmark assessment or the teacher college assessments. This is the more data we can get, the better off we are, and I think this is something that we haven't really, over the years, I've assumed that it's not been as rich as we want it to be in terms of, people just sort of know when somebody needed help, but now we're sort of backing that up with as much support as we can get data-wise. So. And then we have what we call child study protocols, which is when we're actually looking at criteria for a student going into Tier 2 or going into an intervention program. Those protocols have been in place at the lower grades. They have not been in place in the same framework at grades 5 to 8, and so we're beginning that sort of protocol connection in the next month or so, even before the end of this year. Math night is tomorrow, so we hope you'll come. That's amazing. It's one thing that they were working on this year. And then the math committee has been working this year, so they have a whole line document for pre-K to 8 math that's being presented to the superintendent in 2018.
By the end of the year.
By the end of the year, not April. I'm going to change that. I know it's sort of complete. Social Studies Committee has also had a chance to meet this year. They've not had sort of a curriculum review in, Jim, was it 12 years? It was
It's been a while.
a long time.
It takes long for history to make it necessary.
Correct,
Well, the state
right.
hasn't really come up
The
with that.
state has not
20 years.
improved, the state has not touched the state standards for social studies since 2003. So we're still operating off of the 2003 document. However, our faculty here has not waited for the document to be improved. They've been, pretty much ongoing, taking a look at how we scope and sequence the amount of work that we produce for global studies. So we do have a scope and sequence at this point that really pretty much defines where we are now, what's happening at what level. And there's conversations at every grade level about, and as a whole group, about whether we need to tweak or move things so that consecutive grade levels are not getting exactly the same thing. Are we doing location study in 4, 5, 6, 7, and then nowhere else, or are we really kind of looking how it can spiral?
Is that a curriculum map?
Sort of,
Okay.
yeah, a grid. It's a more grid. Yeah, it would be a curriculum now, I suppose, because it's every grade level and it's what we're teaching and how we're teaching it and what the skills are. So.
Does it acknowledge the 9th grade curriculum at the regional school? As a contextual?
The feedback from the 9th grade
Yeah.
curriculum people to our 8th grade happens
Yeah.
because they've made some adjustments to when they teach, particularly the Holocaust, and when they've moved a few things around in the 9th grade curriculum.
And so you adjust to that?
We adjust to that, yeah. They made that decision last year, and I know Marcella and Mike Miller last year went up and talked to the 9th grade this year. Mickey, I think, has not been in contact with them, but Marcella still is. So. And they're co-teaching some units together this year, so it's working fine.
The other thing about alignment is that after the second year, everything's elective, so it's
Yeah, it's
harder.
more the 8th, it's more the 9th, like you wouldn't want, there'd be a gap and you wouldn't want a redundancy.
Right.
It's just lining up 8th with 9th.
Correct. And definitely not repeating information and
Right.
materials. That's the idea.
Okay.
One of our bigger goals this year is, as it was last year, is our social competency goal and our diversity and equity goal and our social emotional learning goal. And really happy to say that our advisor-advisee program has really included a classroom meeting format at every grade now, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's in place as a real strong support for kids. And within that classroom meeting time, we've addressed a lot of work that came out of the diversity work that we did in the fall with Rob Jones. We took part in acknowledging self-esteem. We took part as a faculty in meeting with Rob Jones in October of 2017 to look at student bias and microaggressions. Administrators, meaning Jim and I, basically, and Dennett when he can get there, collaborated with the PTO Diversity Committee and the Social Action Committee. I wasn't sure of the full name, so I put it all into one.
Social action.
To make sure that school staff and administration are engaged in an ongoing dialogue with our staff and our kids about social justice, service, and civic responsibilities. We've looked for opportunities for our kids to grow and engage. We are rolling off this year a full community service day for 8th graders on May 20th. We're going to spend the entire day out doing community service in some form away from school. And then on the days after graduation, there will be some other opportunities for community service more locally for them. Student Council at the Early Act Club, the 8th grade day of service, the BITE actually this year, the Video Club Model UN Science Club have all used their opportunities to strengthen the conversation about diversity and equity. And then we've looked at our methodologies in our class meetings to really identify those support areas that kids need through social emotional learning for students. We have remained in contact with the Challenge Success group that we started with 2 years ago out of Stanford. Concord and Concord-Carlisle High School have sort of, I don't want to say caught up to us. We sort of went out of the gate early, and so now we're sort of in a similar place. And we've joined a consortium of meetings the administration has with Dover, Sherburne, Wellesley, Concord-Carlisle High School, us, and one other school system. Well, I said Wellesley, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Weston?
Maybe Weston, to talk about the actual support for balance and wellness and, that whole overload of student life. And this Friday, in my Friday memo, I'll send out the latest and greatest Denise Pope from Challenge Success, and is offering at the Dover-Sherburne High School in May another chance for parents to come together to hear about the overstressed child and how to break that. So I'll make sure that you get that information too. Oveus is, this is our second full year. We had our kickoff activities for the kids in September. The community and parent rollouts were this fall. We continue to have our monthly meetings as a guidance group about Oveus. And our K-5 class meetings and some of our 6 to 8 advisory meetings throughout the year are including those language and lessons from the Oveus plan. We weave that into our social emotional support for students, how to be an upstander, how to take a lead, how to be a leader, how to be empathetic, how to listen, how to really engage with people. And then we just finished sort of processing the Oveus survey data from this year in 17 and 18. That pretty much targets some of the same areas we saw last year. Comparatively, there were some real improvements in many areas in terms of kids sharing with families when they're, if they're seeing some bullying or they feel that they've been bullied, they're actually, that has been better. They've been opened up to families and to the parents and to the teachers, and they feel like the teachers are taking a much more active role in stepping in when they see things happening. But we'll save that summary for another night. And then here's our consortium with Challenge Success. And then finally, again, our tiered system. We're looking to take a hard, long look at bringing in a screening assessment, a universal screening assessment for grades 5 to 8 in math and literacy. That'll be something that I'll leave for Matt as a legacy to do, so that we have sort of, right now we're compiling the data that we use for the math screening assessment from year to year. We're going to take a look at that in the next few weeks and sort of look at formative and summative assessment data that informs our, how are we using data to inform our curriculum and our instruction. And then finally, ELL, we had an increase. We had some student increases this year in our school that were in need of ELL services, and so that has driven an additional increase in service for, additional increase in faculty for us to meet the needs of those students. And then our ELL teacher has remained up to date in their professional development offerings through the work that she's been doing in whatever MELLC stands for. She told me, and I can't remember, if it's local work. Yeah. And then originally we were also supposed to be, we were hoping to take part in the youth risk survey. We were a little bit late in getting our application in, I guess is the word, right, to take that survey. So it's postponed until 2020 because it's an every other year.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us join this year because we had to join 2 years ago.
Oh, all right.
For this year.
It's a 2-year plan, so it's on the horizon possibly for 2020. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. In our spare time.
Yeah.
We do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay. All right. Susan, would you like to walk us through the budget update?
So we have a small surplus.
Can I invite Susan up here?
Sure.
Sorry,
Come on
darling.
So,
Susan usually likes to stay in her seat,
so
but,
that camera doesn't pan over,
oh, I see why.
No,
Yeah.
one step at a time.
but is Susan in the field of view?
Yeah, that's why I brought her in.
Okay, very good. It's pointing like right to me.
Change is good.
All right, good.
So at the end of March, actually this has a week of April in it, but we still have 22,000 unencumbered free cash. Everything else is spoken for. I've just put in a journal entry to transfer circuit breaker funds back into the budget, and we'll be starting to get all our encumbrances and hopefully prepays for next fall.
This is circuit breaker from last year that's coming?
Correct. The circuit breaker money from last year sat in an account,
Right.
and when we have spent enough in our out-of-district, we can journal entry it back into the budget.
And does that show up in any line?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
It will
yet,
next.
because I gave it to Priscilla, but it, she guarantees by the end of the month the transfer will occur.
So you're right, kind of even up on sped, basically. If you get circuit breaker, you have to deploy it to sped?
Circuit breaker, you have to put back in out-of-district or special ed transportation.
Okay, so if you don't need it for that, you can look in,
I have to put it in out-of-district, and we will need it.
you will need it
Prepays.
Correct.
for prepay, so it will get used.
It will get
And about how
used.
much is it, do you know?
This year, it's 141,444.
101?
140.
140,
141.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah. And the money we're getting this year in quarterly payments from the state then sit in the account. And next year at this time, when we've spent enough, that gets journal entered in.
Got it, okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions? Other questions? Okay, thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Sue.
All right, I guess not a whole lot to say, Jim, on school calendar, snow days update. other than-
I think we pretty much went through it. The last day of school is scheduled to be Wednesday, June 27th. It's still Wednesday, June 27th.
I'm now past the time when it cannot be that.
Even if we had a snow day tomorrow, it would still be
Can't
June
wait for it to
27th.
snow again now.
And that's a half day.
That is a half day. So the other thing that we also discussed is the plan to explore that alternative learning and have teachers work on that program this summer so we can bring it to the school committee so that we can have something in our pocket depending on what happens next year.
The ever-popular technology discard list is next.
The discard list, you can work your way through the discard list. The one thing I think that I do want to remark on is many of the items are old and no longer in use, battery life, poor performance, but the last 24 desktops on the list, purchased in 2014, they're not being used. Right now, they're just dormant. And-
Desktops?
Desktops.
Mhm.
So we see the value decreasing.
Right.
They're not being used here. We think it makes sense for us to liquidate those either by offering them to the town or looking to see what type of money we can get back, what type of value we can get back for those.
Good.
Because right now, they're
The ones
just,
that were in the library, or?
these are the ones that were in the
Yeah.
library, yes.
That's great, Kevin.
Now, we don't
Smart.
have a vote on that today, but we could waive,
Is there any reason to rush that one?
I don't believe so.
only if they lose money. I guess not.
They can put them out for bid before we elect to
I guess
let them
not.
know.
We have an idea what the value would be if we put them out to bid, what we could get back for them. But we also, I think the opportunity also, I don't know if anyone else in the town, if any of the other town
That
offices
would
use
be the
these.
advantage to voting tonight, so we can give this list to Tim,
Right.
and he can spread it around town hall.
It doesn't change the fundamental choice to discard it, right? It's just keep being timely about discarding it. But I'm not, it's just a suggestion, Judge.
It's April, we could do it in May.
You prefer
I-
to do it next month?
I'm just asking whether there's circumstance requiring or suggesting that we waive our process. I'm not expressing an opinion on whether we should or not. I'm asking what the circumstances are that would incline us towards it.
Well, people can mull it over, and when we get to action items, someone can make a motion.
Very good. Okay, thank you. The next one is, I put on the agenda, I'm going to defer to Josh. I put on the agenda because when I originally read the charter, which is not here, the charter for the Municipal Facility Committee, the CPS buildings were part of it, but I went to the selectmen meeting last night, this was last night, and I didn't get the revision from Tim. I asked him for it, but I didn't get it, but I inferred from the discussion that the CPS piece has been removed, at least for now. Is that your understanding?
So I wasn't at the meeting last night either. A little bit of background and history on the
Yeah.
whole thing. The facilities committee has been meeting every couple of weeks, pretty much for the last year, reviewing the architect's study, coming up with recommendations on 4 buildings, talking to every department, talking to FinCom repeatedly, talking to Board of Selectmen repeatedly, and so on. We formed a warrant article requesting appropriation of funds for the formation of a facilities department. FinCom came back with well, we think this is a great idea, but we can't support this because there are a whole bunch of questions about how exactly this department would run. We'd like the facilities committee to tell us how this department would run. To which I said, we don't know how departments run, we know how facilities should run. And pushed it back to them and to Tim Goddard to then come back with recommendations on what does that look like from a process standpoint so we can get it down on paper. That was a meeting of the Facilities Committee with Tim, with representatives from FinCom and Board of Selectmen last Friday, the output of which was a draft document of a job description and a marked up description of a Facilities Committee charter with a number of suggestions. I don't know the disposition of those suggestions.
Well, I do. I think I do know that. So they voted on the markup. They voted on, they didn't, I don't think they needed to take a vote on the protocol. They reviewed the protocol and accepted it. And I asked Tim for a copy, but unfortunately the email bounced because I had the old Mech EDU, which always annoys me. The computer thinks all the town folks are still on this side. But I sent it out again today, but he didn't answer me yet, so I expect to get a copy of that. But they did vote on the charter, and they voted to accept the changes. And again, I didn't see it, but I inferred from what I heard that the decision was made to not have schools be covered in this first year because, they have the 4 that the architect studied, which are not schools, and they got enough to do, basically.
Well, let me back up a step from this.
Okay.
Sometime in the past, I believe it was in the 1960s, this town passed a bylaw establishing a facilities committee with a certain composition with charter across all buildings in town.
Okay, that may have been the original charter they started with.
That was not the original charter they started with. However, the selectmen instead decided to form a committee to look at buildings. Since the selectmen formed it, they don't get to look at the school building. That's the school. That's this committee's responsibility. They may have included school in that.
They did.
In that original description.
Right.
In the marked up version that I saw prior to the selectmen vote, there was a suggestion that school be included in that charter. There was also not a suggestion, but a hard code change that the charter include a school committee representative or delegate, or somebody assigned by the school committee, if not on the school committee. Again, I didn't know how all voted, but there were a lot of suggested changes in there, including the school. But I
So anyway,
wasn't meeting last night.
it's my understanding. So I
That
put.
was last year, though.
No,
So last year, the selectmen wrote a new facilities committee charter that actually had 2 different versions of it floating around, so there was lack of clarity about which was the version they meant.
Got it.
Which is different from the town bylaw that establishes the committee. And I'm not sure that the selectmen have the authority to...
It's too bad you weren't
to ask.
there, because you had a lot more resident knowledge than the people on your committee who were there didn't seem to bring any of that up.
But at least they came.
But they came.
I couldn't go.
And I came and I didn't feel like, I actually squeezed it in. So I really just wanted to hear, the reason I put it on the agenda was because in the form that I saw, which was the week before, where school committee was on it, I wanted to understand what that meant. But now I think, at least for the coming year, it's not an issue for us because we're not subject to that.
So let me back up another step and go out from a different direction. Originally, the town appropriated money for an architect for a study of the facilities. They focused on 4 buildings: police, fire, DPW, town hall.
Right.
Omitted from that were school and library.
Right.
The plan was get back to school and library later, and the following year appropriated money for school and library.
Right.
The committee looked at the report that was done on those 4 buildings and said, this isn't really what we want.
Right.
What we want is more detailed study of systems and depreciating components.
Right.
Why don't we just use that little bit of money instead of on the school and the library, just to do it right for the library? We've been pushing Tim in Town Hall to go forward with that contract. As far as I'm aware, it's not it hasn't been awarded. I'm not even sure if
There's money
up for bid
available
yet,
for
but there's
it.
money for it this year.
Okay.
We're meeting with the library tomorrow night to talk about their plans with the expectation that we review library needs next year.
Yes.
My view is that the school really needs that study, and I think people here understand why. I think there's a perception that we have a new school. We do not have a new school. And we do need a comprehensive look. So to the extent there can be advocacy for
I
a comprehensive
fully
look at
agree
the
and
school
support that.
facilities.
But there
I think
isn't,
it's
there's
much
nothing in the
needed.
process of getting money for this year that would cover that, right?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Also, in looking at this, in establishing the facilities department for the town, there's a lot they can learn in process and
Right.
systems from what the school does.
Right.
So the school has systems and processes and
Right.
software packages for monitoring the maintenance of various components of the school building,
Yeah.
of scheduling the maintenance, of assigning individuals to oversee that.
Yeah.
This is something that we need to do on a townwide basis.
Right.
Potentially, those same systems can incorporate a fuller list of depreciating
Yeah,
components.
I agree, I think with what your broad point is, which from my view is, we started this process back in the beginning of the year, last year it might have been, saying, well, really, we have David Flannery, and then maybe he should be extended to be the new guy and use that, leverage the expertise here to the town, and for various reasons that will not happen. But, so if you're, as I understand it, if the committee is going to hire, or there will be a hiring of a person and a bunch of projects, I agree with both comments that there's a lot to be learned here, and there's a need here for some of these services as well. But given that there's a new person and a new charter, it's probably best in the first year of it not to take a system that works, whether imperfectly or otherwise, and roll it in.
Yes.
So-
My recommendation is that next year,
Yeah.
that the school meet with the facilities committee as
Absolutely.
well as with the facilities department manager
Right.
about putting together a recommendation to the town to appropriate money for that study.
Yeah.
And that
I
the
think that's
facilities
a smart-
manager can be the one to oversee
Right.
that administration, get the data that should be needed to do that job.
Yeah, I think that makes
We
sense.
need a comprehensive look, because I think
Yeah, and don't forget, we have this.
discussion needs to be informed.
Yeah, and we have a capital needs, you know, we sort of tabled the air conditioning discussion after we kind of got
HVAC.
HVAC, sorry. And Susan, my recollection is David was supposed to go fetch some historical data if there was any.
He's supposed to be tracking it. I haven't
I
asked him
think
for
you
any.
could, what I would recommend is that, because if he had it, he probably would have come up with it. Let's get ready for the hot part
Yep.
of this time, so when we meet in the fall, we at least have current, you know, data
Okay.
about that.
So
Ron.
I agree. It isn't that expensive to put a network-connected temperature humidity
Right.
sensor in a handful of rooms
Right, exactly.
and have it real-time collect data that you can
Right.
look at after the fact.
Right.
It's small money.
Right, so we should do,
It's going to hit 80.
To put a sensor in each room
For a lot of
that
days.
monitors temperature and humidity in $100.
I'm hoping for the pool.
yeah.
Can I just ask one, oh, sorry. My question was going to be, Dave, putting your FinCom hat on,
Mhm.
or anyone else who knows the answer to this, could we propose a capital request? Is a study about capital needs appropriate for a capital request?
We tried that. Well, A, we wouldn't do it at short notice for this meeting. right?
No, I mean in FY '20 planning.
Yes.
We can certainly do that. The feedback we got, we went in front of the Josh's committee, Capital Requirements Committee, in, I don't remember when now, in the run-up to this, and we sort of proposed that, and they said, well, before we even say yes to that, just give us some simple data, like how hot are the rooms, right?
That was the
That's fair.
response to, what about this HVAC system?
Yeah.
Not the response to, what do you think of commissioning a study of the whole facility?
Well, okay, I think we're both saying the same thing differently. What I interpret your comment, Melissa, is could we propose some funding for a study? And the answer is, of course, we can propose it. but what I'm saying is we did propose, the scope might have been slightly different, but we basically proposed that we get some money to do some kind of study. And the answer we got was, why don't you first take a look at what data either you have or you can easily get, and I agree with your assessment. And then if that, it's kind of like our discussion we had this afternoon. If you're going to propose a project, you should at least come with some supporting data that says, I need the project.
Right.
So I don't disagree with that, and I think we're where we are now, so the point is, and if David doesn't have the technological knowledge to put, a Nest or whatever, put those wireless sensors in, we should go find that, but I'm sure we can get it. Let's collect
We should start.
May, June, September,
May,
October,
July,
May.
August, September.
I don't know, July, August, is that relevant?
Well, if we have the stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. It's hot out there.
It'll come.
Nobody's-
Is there
These things
summer
gather the
school
temperature every
in-
minute forever and put them on
That's
the
it,
fire.
it really comes
In
in.
July.
Is there summer school in the middle
Data
school?
right now.
When?
But I
He
think
has
they all
access.
run in
Okay.
fall.
Yeah, back
Yeah,
farm.
nobody goes out there.
Well, probably.
Yeah. So this year.
Okay. I think that's good. Let's keep going.
All right. So we're gonna stay on top of that, right?
Yeah. What? Yeah, I need somebody to inherit
HVAC
your
used to be
role
my
of,
thing.
so
You looked at
Christine.
me, I'll be all of it.
Okay, good.
Let's talk.
All right. So the next item is kind of a broad discussion thing, but just to paint the picture of, we will have next year 2 students going to Minuteman Regional Vocational Tech, and 1 student now has elected for Neshoba Valley, which is
So 3 total? Or?
3 total, which is exciting for me because I was a proponent of branching out, and somebody's
Yeah.
actually branching
Got it.
out, so that's great. That's the good news. The bad news is, the sending district in an out-of-district placement is responsible for the transportation costs. It's not our, as in the school budget responsibility, but it is our, as in the collective Carlisle responsibility.
Okay.
Carrie is very underwater right now, and so I volunteered to help her out to at least, because it's our kids, right? I mean, we are responsible. So
Carrie
Colburn Dion, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So one question, because I had a question for my friend Mike Gilbert, when I read the statute, it wasn't clear whether the sending district is Carlisle K through 8 or CCRSD, because the students won't be in Carlisle K through 8. And he said, oh, it's CCRSD. But I don't think he's right, actually. What do you think? That's the first
But then
question.
he made the comment that said, but it gets charged back to the town
Yeah.
anyway, so
So it's
but
a
I-
distinction without a difference, I guess.
Well,
But I don't see how that works, given the assessment formula, so I think it's something we need to look into.
Okay, so we have
Yeah.
to, I think Region needs to take that up as a question, because how do they do it? They're out of the district as well. Is it
Right.
Concord K through 8 or is it
Well,
CCRSD?
in Congress, it's just a matter of which budget you
Same,
charge it to.
okay.
Yeah.
However, I also checked with Jay Sullivan at DESI, and he gave me a bunch of stuff that is pretty clear from the statute that it is the responsibility of the town. So, town. Meanwhile, the first year, we are in the first year of sending children to Minuteman without a district agreement, and we are incurring about $30,000 of
32.
to transport 2 children with a little bus. And so the next question is, well, can we get reimbursed? Because the statute also says you can get reimbursed. So that's the good news, but the bad news is, there's no reimbursement money.
There's no funding.
There's no funding. There was 6% of the cost was repaid last year. I looked at the thing on the website this afternoon. And next year, the Ways and Means today or yesterday proposed 0%. So there won't be any money. So that's $35,000. But it's a long way and it's 2 kids. Now we have 1 child going the other direction. So we're trying to explore a little bit about options, including the parents driving and paying them, meeting the bus that goes there anyway at some convenient point, having the 1 bus that is going to Minuteman take a diversion, Uber, Lyft,
Well, there is-
COA, I mean, there's a lot
I
of...
need to be core.
I had heard on
They're all core, they're
NPR,
all-
there was a service
Yeah.
to transport children safely. That's like an Uber,
Okay.
but it's specifically so that the people are quarried in a different way. I'm gonna see if I can find
You
that.
should find that.
Yeah.
But option 2
Not
was
there should
something
be.
that
What's
shows
option 2?
the meeting,
I know
them
that.
at the town
Neshoba's,
line.
well, Neshoba has a bus route, and they're published online, and I talked to the business manager in Neshoba Valley, and she said, you know, if it's not too far out of the way, we'll divert, you know, we'll pick up. But then you do still have, if a parent drives to that point, I'd be okay with it. I'm not sure about some other service meeting, about, you know, there's too many moving
Oh,
parts at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
So I think, I am in contact with the parents about that. They were kind of like, whoa, I just thought a bus would pick us up. So there's that. COA actually has in its charter to transport children with disabilities, and I think they mean physical disabilities, although it could be any disabilities.
But he bought a vehicle last year.
But they don't really, I don't think they're comfortable with doing it just for children generally, and the child who's going to Neshoba Valley does not have any disabilities.
The
And they're
COA,
queried, and they're all checked out.
David, the COA is not long on funds, but is long on vans.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to potentially exchange. If they can put in drivers, we can pay them to move kids.
Yeah, it's true. So you think they have extra vans?
I know they have extra vans.
Okay,
They're
well,
parked in
that's
the
good
DPW shed, much to Gary's dismay.
Okay. Well, that's good input. I think I will pursue that. I'm talking to, what's her name? Debbie Farrell. She's the transportation coordinator. You can look up the
I will.
thing. I think that, yeah, the Uber Lyft thing, I mean, I use it a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The problem with just using an Uber would be
Oh, it wouldn't be
tremendous,
safe,
because
no.
you just couldn't, but he couldn't do it. But, I mean, the point, I think, and we have to think about this going forward, now that we're out of the Minuteman District, and there may be bits and pieces of people choosing different places to go for high school, we need to come up with some general, guideline, I think.
Right, and it just a reminder, when we embarked on this at the beginning of last year, it was clarified that it's a little awkward, right, because we're the committee with the educational expertise, not myself personally, but the administration. But yet, it wouldn't come from our budget. And
It doesn't come from our
It's a
budget.
town budget line item, and so I
Right.
just want to make sure we keep those lines clear.
Very clear. I think because we're one town and we're all on one team.
No, but Josh just said we would pay them to do it.
Well,
We, the school committee,
Yeah.
we the town, but in the past,
Yeah.
I don't have it this year, but in the past, in this process of leaving the Minuteman group, the selectmen asked this committee to provide support and
Yeah,
advice for
and I'm
that
not
process. And
questioning
it's in
that.
that context that I say we, not
Absolutely, yeah.
in the context of
Yeah.
this district.
Okay. Okay, so those are all good suggestions, and it's a continuing thing. So you'll check region for me, you'll check NPR for me, Christine.
Yep.
I'll take up the extra vans and continue the dialogue, and then we'll see, where we are. But as Jim points out, even if we end up absorbing two separate little transportations, we're still financially better off than if we had stuck with the region, with the Minuteman region. Anything else? I think we're done with that, so we can move to policies. I guess on residency, I've got to dust off my brain here.
So this is the one we updated, and then
We had the-
re-updated, and we added the bullet to cover for
The bullet of, it's the last bullet.
the second to last.
Of the new students. So everything else we've reviewed prior, other than the second to last bullet?
Did this get longer?
This is an update, we had one we reviewed, and then we saw another version, which broke it down into these bulleted, and I think this is a new bulleted section.
Well, we had asked
But the red line is
MASC
only for the new bullet. Are the bullets altogether new, or are they just
Well,
reformatted?
we had, So we had a simpler policy initially, which was our legacy Carlisle school policy. And we debated maybe 2 meetings ago, 50% of the time, 4 nights a week, blah, blah, blah. And we added, because of one particular case that is happening now, in the case where parents are divorced or separated and one parent's a resident, blah, blah, blah. But then I again reached out to my pal Mike, and he gave us I think, did he, Nancy? Did we get this from MASC, this model policy?
Jim, you got
Oh, no, we got it from Andy Waugh.
Andy Waugh.
Andy Waugh, our council, gave us this policy, thank you, which is a little more legally, but it was kind of, it was more granular, I guess. And did we discuss that last meeting? Or maybe we
Not
didn't?
No, we
No.
didn't.
So we haven't.
This is a new.
No, this is just a little
So the,
confusing
I'm sorry,
because it
I'm
looks
sorry,
like.
that's right. The whole thing is new. The whole thing is new, and we
But we knew it.
added one red line bullet to the policy he had, which has
Correct.
been vetted by whatever.
So I think just as a procedural point, I don't know if this is just, I don't know if we wipe away the history. I don't know, I don't know.
Oh, I just.
We want to keep the history right, I
We
think
the
that's.
date. Oh, we want to keep the history.
Well, because it's
Whole
revised,
policy?
it may be wholesale
Revised,
revised.
yeah.
Even though it's
I
a
mean,
new one?
Still revised.
revised, yeah. Or
Whether you-
replaced.
Where you
Oh,
change
I
a
would say
period or
replaced.
the whole text
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
reviewed.
I would say replaced.
Replaced,
Right.
okay.
This is a significantly different policy than the one we looked at last month, which my recollection was we had, Melissa added the word notwithstanding the foregoing, something like that.
Yeah, we were done.
Yeah, I thought we were done. You added one word or one phrase, and we were ready to go.
Notwithstanding the previous sentence.
Exactly. And now we've got something completely new.
Well, the reason.
So why is it new and improved?
Because a lawyer gave it, a school versus, well, lawyers gave me both sides, so I can't really say that. I do have a concern that our policy sort of gets it halfway, right? They
So
have
let-
certain things, but not everything, so I.
So let me ask you this, does it change like the April 1, that if you move out of town after April 1, you can still go to Carlisle? Or is like substantive stuff changed, or is it just more comprehensive?
Well, it does have the April 1. It's the last bullet. I have not done a line-by-line comparison.
So your view is that this is more comprehensive? It's just we can't vote on it
Right,
tonight.
so I think we should
We're
all
not
take
planning
it
to
back
do
and just
anyway.
study.
Yeah.
Right.
Beyond simply more comprehensive, my understanding is that on the bullet item related to whose parents divorce, that it's substantively
Is the divorce
different.
section different?
I believe it is different, whereas we said previously that children of divorce, as long as one parent lives here, we'll want them in our district, or allow them in our district. This actually imposes a lot more conditions, including analysis of where the students reside pursuant to a custody arrangement, the center of students' domestic, social, and civic life, legal documentation must be provided. It's a rather different burden than simply one of the custodial parents lives in
Well,
town.
I would say that's a fair statement, and I haven't given it such a close reading, but I think that, I suppose it depends on what we want. What Mike Gilbert implied is that, he says this is a true dilemma for local districts. Unless you're absolutely super granular, if it breaks the way you don't want it, you probably don't have much recourse. Now, maybe we don't care.
I understand, but the question was, is this substantially the same thing as we looked at before, or is it different? And I'm pointing out one area in which it seems
No,
quite
it's
different.
much more legal stuff, right?
It's not just more legal stuff, it's to say that one parent lives here is very different from saying we're going to analyze all the children's records to make sure that the
I
majority
also don't know
live
if it's a
here.
sentence. Students whose parents divorce or separate and share physical custody.
Yeah, it's right.
You're
It's
looking for a
missing
verb?
something. Oh, you know what? It's because the residents you have to read.
It's like German.
carefully. You have
Go
to.
to go 3 pages, depends on
Oh, it's not intended to be a sentence?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, we can certainly strike the, I would suggest that the bullet ending with Town of Carlisle, period, is essentially the same, just written maybe more legally.
I think maybe.
And then you
if-
get rid of the investigation stuff. and
I think
kind of
maybe,
back to
Nancy,
part.
if you could send out the old one, the one we were working on with last month and this one in one email,
Yeah,
and then people can look at, kind of
Right.
just digest it and then we talk about it again.
I think that's a good suggestion.
I also think that, David, as you suggested, we have to decide what we want it to say. Like, what is the criteria that we're looking for anyway, and make the policy.
Yeah, and I think, that's a good point. I think that my recollection is the argument, or the initial debate we had about 50% of the time versus 4 nights a week is moot because none of them are deemed enforceable. So we should skip that completely and outline the things we do want. And that's kind of where this policy is trying to go.
And our last version of the policy was kind of going with MASC's rep that said,
The ultimate decision rests with the parents.
yeah.
So there is the one ad we made from the Andy Watt policy, which is red line bullet, penultimate bullet there, comes from Susan? She banned it. Isn't it from her?
I think it was just from an anecdote from this year.
Yeah, I think there are other cases where students move in,
I guess that's the challenge, whether you want to cover every possible scenario, that's what the bullets do, or whether you just want to have broad,
yeah, but I mean, the reason I'm just
and then we'll investigate.
explaining why that showed up is situations where maybe an uncle takes the child in, doesn't really have legal custody, but claiming that the child has residency in Carlisle. And what, I think it was Susan, I forget who was
Yeah,
asking.
well, it was the scenario that we have where
Is
a
just give us
family was
proof
moving in
that
with
the
another family member
kid
in
is there.
town.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, I think you're right. It's a question of do we want to try to cover all the bases or just, or not, so.
I think when you read through it, a lot of it lines up. The October one is the same,
Right.
the April one is the same. So
Yeah,
just doing a quick read, my gut is that it's just a more fulsome policy,
right.
aside from the divorce section. So I think we might want to just,
I like your idea of looking at them both, though, Melissa.
yeah.
Okay. Very good. We'll do it. What's next?
Background check.
Background checks. I turn over to Melissa.
Okay. So, what's in the packet? Okay, so,
Packet is the whole background check policy.
this is, okay, so the existing policy that you have in your packet is basically, if you look at it, if you go to the back of it where it starts core requirements, what I've figured out in studying it is that this was our original Corey policy.
Oh, right.
Ah, okay. I never could
And
figure out why.
then we layered on top of the original Corey policy.
Without reference to it, but, yeah.
No, it says formally Corey policy.
No.
We kept what we had, and then we added a very close version of the DJ,
IS model policy.
yeah.
And then we added the DJS model policy also, right? Just to make sure we have all
yeah.
the bases covered.
So basically what I did is,
DCJ.
and if you go, I went on some other district's website. If you go on some other district website, like Bedford, for example, they have a similar version of the Corey one. Does that sound right? And I did a red line to that one, but it's not completely the same, but it's a little bit different. But, so after I looked at it all, I decided that kind of if you step through the one that starts with Corey requirements, it has very similar information to the one of the model policy. The model policy is just drafted more clearly.
Yep.
Except that it has, so what I did was I took what this document is with the green, and I
Yep.
don't know if there's a copy for Cynthia or not. Is what MASC has as their model policy, which is basically the
DCGA.
DC, you can just say that when and I worked off of that. So when we last reviewed this policy, which I feel like was more recent than 2014, but maybe it was that long ago. I remember Claire pointing out that there were new so-called covered persons, and we needed to make sure that our policy was covering subcontractors.
Okay.
And there was this thing about the taxi thing,
Yep.
people taking taxis, which seems a
Taxis,
little
yeah.
weird.
Cars.
And I do remember, Josh, us toiling over how we worked on, but we seem to have gotten there, but I think there still could be some more improvements here. So that's what you've got here in the, with the green edits. There's a couple things that are not here, which you guys can decide whether or not you want to put in. For example, we don't define certain people who have direct contact with students. Direct contact is defined in the statute. That's not currently in the model policy, but it's in kind of our old version of the policy. So if you guys think it's important to define that, I felt like the model policy worked, so I did not include it, but you may want to include it. We specifically state in our existing policy that the school committee chair is responsible for reviewing any school committee direct hires. So the school committee chair is technically responsible for reviewing that material. And I think we've done that practice. Yeah. So that's something I didn't put in, but may be worth putting in just because, you know.
I think it's a good idea.
So it's basically the hiring authority does the reviewing. I didn't think it was necessary to put the fee in, so I cut that out of our existing policy.
Is your overall thing, is you're taking, what are 3 policies stitched together? And
Into one 2-pager.
Wait, so this policy
This is what I recommend.
covers the CHRI?
They all say the same
Yeah,
thing.
they just use different acronyms. I think CHRI is maybe a more appropriate acronym.
That's the fingerprinting process.
Yeah.
And this is the national database.
Okay, so
And Corey is
maybe,
Massachusetts.
maybe it's not, maybe it needs another round. But when I read what we have as a policy, maybe it also needs this.
Some people,
CHRI.
teachers need CHRI, right, but volunteers who don't need.
Teachers
Corey.
need CHRI and student teachers.
There's certain people who need
Paraprofessionals,
CHRI.
yes.
And people like me that go
You just
do
do a
Valentine's
Corey check.
Day in the classroom need a Corey check. So, that's a good one, by the way. I missed those days.
So you might want to look at it and see, like, stuff like that, if it is not covered. But that's what
So it sounds like we actually will need 2 policies.
well, I can look back at the CHRI piece, but I think it may just need to have the CHRI paragraph lifted and added to it.
Okay.
But it's not in the MASC policy, which I think is interesting, but that's,
It says
Which
it's
one?
required by law,
I
though.
thought that would.
Oh, right.
yeah.
I think this, our policy as it exists with those 2 components, I think that mirrors the MASC,
So then maybe there's another.
that sample
MASC.
policy that they have.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, I think they probably just stapled 2 policies together at one point in time.
We don't have a reference here on source MASC, no, that's clear.
So a couple of things and so we can clarify that, but a couple of things I thought it was important to do. I thought it was important to attach the form, the acknowledgement form, to the policy, because the form talks about who's a covered person, and you want to just make sure those always match up in your policy.
Yep.
There's some things here that talk about when a new query check is needed within a year. Our policy doesn't address when someone might have to do that, so if people don't know when they would have to do that, then you might want to think about clarifying.
If a
When?
new query check is to be on a subject. Well, I don't understand that sentence, Melissa.
If a new query check is to be made on a subject within a year of his
Oh,
hiring.
for some other reason, like a status change? or
Yeah, I
something?
mean, but it doesn't say when that requirement would be triggered, so if people have questions about when that's triggered,
Right,
then we maybe would want to put it in here so people can look to it
right.
to know when.
Isn't there in every,
Sorry, if I can
Yeah.
interject, so Jane White looks at these every June, and they expire in 3 years. So she then reaches out to everybody who's expired.
but this is different, Nancy.
This is different, this is,
Do we
if
do
for
it
some
inside
reason,
Do we do it twice in the same year, in other words?
it just didn't make sense to me, it wasn't obvious to me. I mean, I suppose, do query checks transfer from district to district? Are they a state thing, or are they they're,
Fingerprints do.
Query checks don't transfer, fingerprints
Yeah.
do transfer.
okay.
And we would never submit queries like 4 months apart without having someone fill out the form again a second time. Not, I don't think we've ever had an incident where we've done it, but. if
What
we
would
did,
be a
that would
triggering event?
We were stuck on that also, we did.
Okay.
Couldn't come up with a.
Yeah,
summary.
so I mean, it might be worth asking.
You run a query check when you terminate them?
No, I'm saying it terminating, and then if you rehire them several months later.
Oh, yeah. That's
all
an
the
idea.
documentation
So,
has to be-
do you want to continue to tackle this, Melissa, or do you want us to turn it over to Andy and have him
So,
wrestle it out?
so I just wanted to point out one other thing, is that I don't, as far as back on who's covered, does anyone know what a professional licensing applicant is?
Where are you getting all this?
No, we weren't. That
So-
stumped us also.
It says it covers prospective and current employees, subcontractors, volunteers, including
Oh, I see.
interns, and professional licensing applicants. And I don't know what a professional licensing.
So under that
applicant is.
CHRI list, they also have the
Mhm.
list where they include student teachers, and so maybe under Corey they're considered that, but they use different
Oh.
language on the CHRI.
Like teacher license?
Yeah, so if you have someone in here doing a practicum, maybe it's referring to that, but
Okay.
I'm not sure. And the others,
Okay.
and the other one, they actually identify student teachers.
Because I was just, you know, when I was talking about who are we covering, let's just make sure we know who they are, so that,
Right.
you know.
But it does seem, at least our policy, and I presume it's the law, because it references that it's as required by law. If you have direct, unmonitored contact with children, that's the CHRI bar, right? Is that right? And if you have monitored or indirect, as all those other people would be, then it's just a query check.
So why don't I just go back and add the CHRI, and then
Okay.
I will offload it.
Okay. That sounds good.
And given that there's significant changes, it might be worth having
Andy, look at it.
someone, Andy, just
Okay.
making sure.
They both, that direct unmonitored.
Yeah, right, both, so. Okay, MSN to continue to add CHI, then Andy. Review. Okay. Anything else on that for now?
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. So, all right, and then we have, is the visitor policy, is that a new one now? School visits, is that what you're? That's new, right? New one, that we haven't looked at this before, right? Okay.
No suggested changes?
I don't believe we have any suggested changes for the school visits. pretty straightforward.
Okay.
We might be able to move one ahead.
I know, maybe one.
Just a kind of a tidbit, do you get the MESC newsletter that talks about when they issue new policies? Yeah. Okay.
All right. Communications and correspondence.
What about field trip policy, or is it?
That's going to be in the voting.
Actually-
That's to be voted.
It's down here on the agenda.
So we have an invitation from the MASC to a Day on the Hill, school committee members.
Right.
Do that? I'll send it to Josh. Thank you. A few correspondences.
And the ever exciting superintendent's report.
Let's see what we've had taking place. We can go back to March, 7th grade, Seussical. I'm not sure if everybody had the opportunity to go to Seussical. It was outstanding.
It was
performance
awesome.
by our
Yeah, it
7th
really
graders. Entertaining. I think everyone said that the show matched the class and the students.
It did.
It really was. It was
Yeah.
phenomenal. So kudos to the producers and the directors and the
With
performers.
snow, all kinds of snow delays, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, limited practice, that was what they're up against for their practice time. This past month, we've been doing some investigation for student information systems also. Some of you may or may not be aware, we use iPass as our student information system, and it doesn't work quite seamlessly with the state reporting, and it doesn't do our schedule, it doesn't do a number of things. So we've been investigating a couple of other systems. We had a group of school looking at Power School, and we're looking at Aspen. Aspen's what they use in CCHS. So right now, we've had 2 presentations in, and we're gonna have some conversations, and then we're gonna look at the budgetary implications, and then we'll see what type of plan we're looking at, whether it's a 1, 2, 3-year plan moving us out. We're involved in negotiations. That's been meeting frequently this past month. Had the opportunity to attend the substance abuse breakfast put on by the Concord-Carlisle Youth Services. Carrie referenced earlier the youth risk survey. So at this breakfast, they shared a lot of data about adolescents in both Carlisle and Concord and their habits and their behaviors. They gathered the data from interviews with staff at both Carlisle and Concord and at the youth risk survey data they got from the Concord students and the students at CCHS. So it's pretty informative. It wasn't anything striking, but it was the fact that we should continue to be aware that our students, like adolescents across the country, are engaged and have opportunities, and we need to be aware of that and continue to develop our health curriculums and our social emotional supports in school to ensure that they have the supports there to help them make good decisions and navigate all those obstacles that adolescence throws before them. There's actually a workshop, parent program coming up. Let's see where we are. On Tuesday, April 24th, at CCHS, the Center for Parents and Teachers is hosting a forum on social liability. They have a couple of programs to show off that. Many of our parents may not be in that role when they're concerned about social liability laws, but as prom season, spring comes along, and people start opening their doors to entertain their children, their children's friends, they need to be aware of the liabilities that go along with that, because sometimes we, as parents, might not make the most informed decisions about what we think is safe for children, but really are not proven to be in the best interest of children. So if you're interested, if you're a parent, April 24th at CCHS. This past month, we've also had collaboration. Liz Gray, 6th grade English, has been collaborating with Nick Greenwood in one of our Global Perspective goals, where they've linked up with another class slowly progressing outside of Carlisle in Pennsylvania. So they're moving on this over in Pennsylvania. They've connected in there. They've created a number of little book clubs within the class. So there's a number of classes in Pennsylvania, a number of classes here, reading a variety of different books and then communicating and making social connections.
Great, they send
Doing
each
some
other
literature.
videos and.
Yeah, it's really amazing. They develop questions. Even I saw them when they were just breaking the ice, getting to know one another, and outstanding. Many of you know we had the Colonial Road Show in March. In case you missed it, we'll do it again next year for you. But I do think again, Nick Greenwood's been out there working. He worked with the teachers, integrated a new component, at least something to bring it into the 21st century this year with part of their PowerPoint slide presentation.
Cool.
So the road show is moving on. We have a member of our World Language Committees here. So the World Language Committee's been doing some investigation into the future of world languages here in Carlisle based on Ms. Baker's status in the district. And we've developed a survey that we're going to be putting out after the vacation, really just to ask parents about their experience, their children's experience in the World Language Program, and then ask them questions about the future, where they envision the program going and what they would like to see the program entail in the years to come. In line with the survey, we also have a survey we just put out, working with another group of people, parents, and then through the Wellness Committee, there's been a survey that went out regarding the dining room and the lunch program. So we've had a number of respondents to that. We'll be sending out an email, probably when we get back, and we'll be closing the survey. Most people respond to the survey in the first 2 or 3 days, so we're going to give them a little more time, and that survey will close after the vacation, at which point we will be analyzing the data with a small group of parents and Sue Robichaud in the cafeteria, sharing that, presenting out to the Wellness Committee, and then sharing out to the broader community what the feedback was and what steps we're going to be taking moving forward. We had our student council hosted a senior tea on April 3rd actually, on Tuesday, and that was well attended in the cafeteria, early release day. Also, the following day, this is something interesting for the community, the administrative team hosted a breakfast for the Council on Aging. It's a wonderful tradition. So we held that, what's the name of the building across the room? The Sleeper Room. Always tremendous, so everyone gets to bake, put their best foot forward, everybody comes out, they love David Flannery's cakes and biscuits, and it was just a wonderful program altogether. Then on Friday, April 6th, we hosted a group from Google Expedition. So again, Nick Greenwood, pushing the envelope, applied for a program to come through us through Google. Our teachers designed some lessons that could incorporate this augmented, it's augmented reality, so it's not, what's the other reality? It's not virtual, so it's augmented. So there was a little disappointment that it was only augmented reality, but it was interesting. Students got to go into the library where it was all augmented reality, so it doesn't take much to make it happen, but they got to experience from weather systems to animals to World War I and World War II, just a variety of programs, and it was so interesting because between the morning, students went in for an experience in the morning, they got to experience one aspect. They had an upgrade at lunch, so the people here from Google were just, we just got this new update. They updated, so the students that came in the afternoon had a different type of experience, so they could tour
Same subject, but
same subject. So instead of looking at a three-dimensional model of the Coliseum that you could walk around, all of a sudden you could walk into the Coliseum in the afternoon. It's an interesting program. So there was just some.
What grades was it, Jim?
I think it was 5 through 8. I think 5 through 8. People went there for a variety of programs.
Wow.
So they walk in.
Augmented reality?
Augmented reality. So it's fourth grade was there too. It was
Made the home report.
Everybody was coming in.
not on my phone.
So you have a
That's in
phone,
school, nothing.
and you look at your phone, and you can see whatever you're looking at.
Yeah.
Now you can blow it up so that it gets bigger, and then it is 3D, so you can look around. Or if you were looking at a Tyrannosaurus Rex, you can walk around the back of the T-Rex. Or if you're exploring some artifacts from World War I, that all depended on what you were looking at. So it was interesting. As I said, it was augmented. It wasn't quite virtual. I think everybody was thinking it was going to be virtual, but it was interesting, and the teachers designed lessons, and it was engaging, and I think everybody found it illuminating.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. Also, I think this past weekend, we had sorry I couldn't make it to the CF auction, which I hear was amazing.
It's amazing.
It was
And-
amazing.
So I don't know,
What's
congratulations.
how much did you raise?
I can't tell you, but it was record-breaking. We don't have the final numbers. It was
And record-breaking attendance.
Yeah, it was
record-breaking
awesome.
attendance, the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. It was so inspiring, I thought, to see the energy in that room.
Yeah,
It was like,
And Jimmy Tingle, what a great choice.
he was funny.
He was pretty funny.
But it was just really energizing
Yeah,
night, and it was
it
awesome.
was. Good job.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know Susie was very amped up and stressed and waiting for the night to be over, and then she
Feels so good right now, I can't even tell you.
That's what I mean, she was very relaxed on Monday, like that was great.
Allison's got nothing to do.
Well, the whole community appreciated it. I think you set just a great
I'll let everybody
standard.
know.
It was March 25th.
It was amazing.
I'll let the team know.
Yeah, thank
A
you.
lot of people working on it.
Yeah, it was it's a lot of work. I know why you have it only every other year.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Also, we have, so then we also have the PTO book fairs going on right now. If you haven't had a chance to go in and buy books, come back tomorrow, you'll have another opportunity to do that. Then we have the Micah Festival, Christy.
On the 25th.
On the 25th of March. So our band students got a bronze. And then did our
I don't know
core
what
students?
chorus did.
Both bands got bronze.
I think so.
I can't believe it. I feel like that was like
I
2
know.
months ago. And then, as Carrie referenced, we've also been doing MCAS for the last 2 weeks. And there will be some more assessments taking place when we come back from the vacation. We do have vacation next week, so hopefully everybody can get some rest. And then we have math night tomorrow night. So if you want to come out for the math night, the math teachers K through 8 have been coordinating the evening, so you can come out to that. And also tomorrow is opening day for the softball team. So if you want to go, we have a softball team. We don't have a baseball team this year, but the softball team has their new uniforms. They're out there ready to go.
All right.
Opening day tomorrow.
Oh, that's great.
I think that's all I have to share on
That's
the
a lot.
superintendent report.
Wow. Very good, thank you. Member committee reports, Christine?
I don't have anything on the website front, but I can tell you that there's a camera right here.
Yeah, very good.
So if all goes right, I will be able to give you guys, and I don't know if we can post it on our website, but I'll put it on the Facebook page, where and when and how folks can access. It will be run on CCTV, and it will also be on demand, so they can click on a link to see it from the CCTV website. So
Okay, so you should, once you get that set, you should probably inform the mosquito, well, actually the mosquitoes here. But beyond just being buried in the minutes, should there be some kind of,
okay, it would just be a link, yeah. Yeah,
no, I mean, should,
it's not. Yeah, I can let the paper know.
well,
Yeah.
the paper's here. I'm just saying, rather than just having it as part of the report of the meeting, could it merit its own little box of,
You're talking to me.
yes, I am.
You can send me the link and I'll see what they do.
Okay,
All right.
I don't have any control over that.
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Josh, anything more on?
Bye.
I've already spoken, and you don't want to hear me again, do you?
Yeah, I think you've
Region?
given your report. So I attended Concord Town Meeting Monday night.
Day 1 of 3, or what was?
Yep, potentially 4.
Wow.
The regional
Should we-
budget passed
All right.
after a few road bumps.
With debate or not much debate?
0 questions.
Wow.
We did not move the $1 million warrant to pave the high school entrance roads and install lighting. There was fulsome debate among the committee members as to whether or not to move it. But ultimately, it did not get moved, so.
Is it just tabled for a year?
Yes, there's this whole campus advisory. The two kind of schools of thoughts were there's this campus advisory committee going on. So why are we going to do these two things before we know what may become of the campus? The other school of thought was we've been talking about doing this for 3 years. Since this is really part of the building project, and this is finishing work from the building project. And so those were kind of the two different schools of thought. The one thing that is an immediate concern is the fact that if you walk out of the Beatty Center and you look at the school, there are 0 lights along that road. And water safety instruction, kids, if they have, there's kids going back and forth between the Beatty Center and the high school. In particular, 100 swim team kids go back and forth in the winter when it gets dark at 5 or 4:30. That was my primary concern. And so there's going to, even though we didn't move the warrant, there's going to be an effort to install lighting at least on the corners
Okay.
so that there's lighting. until there's a decision made.
Good job, Melissa.
And I had the CEF option on my report too, because it was so awesome. So I just thought it was a great school community event and all that jazz, so.
Great.
That's it.
Okay. Okay, very good. So I think we can move to vote on 3 policies. We have a field trip, and then we have a out-of-state overnight field trip policy. And I think that,
Non-discrimination.
and then the non-discrimination. So we originally had a fairly granular field trip policy that involved getting, outlining approval slips from nurses and things like that, which I think the feeling was that was too granular for us. And we pretty much adopted in whole the MASC, or we are putting in, suggesting the MASC field trip policy. And the only addition, well, there are a couple additions. So the front end of the policy in your packet is read out of MASC. And then we make mention that, you know, that we should keep the cost reasonable, and that if families can't afford it, we'll figure out a way to let them participate. And finally, that we have to have signed permission slips. Those last 3 pieces are not MASC.
So the last one I actually brought up at the last meeting, requesting that the policy not require signed permission slips, but require parent approval
Yeah.
in some form or other, which leaves us open to, in the future, adopting electronic approval means.
I'm okay with that. I think, you can't just say, has to be,
Some parents might.
parent approval can't be verbal, right? Like my dad said it was okay, kind of approval. Right.
So Josh signed, I think, and you shouldn't rely on me, but signed under Mass law now.
E-signatures are signatures, but all students must return signed permission slips is rather different than
Oh,
saying.
the student returning it was your point, yeah.
Yes, that we must have permission, you know, we must have a parent approval.
Why wouldn't we just say the district must receive?
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's good.
The
Thank you,
district
Josh.
must receive,
And I understand we're not ready to go ahead with a change in how it's enacted.
district must
This
receive
allows us to do it.
signed permission slips,
Signed permission.
signed permission, or for all, well, how do we tie back to, for all students, or for all
For
students?
each student.
For each student. Thank you.
Attending.
For each student attending.
Good, Josh.
Okay, so the last sentence would read, the district must receive signed permission for each student attending,
For each student to participate in the trip.
for each student, so say that again,
For each student to participate
to participate.
in each trip.
For each.
So Jim,
that would
does-
be more ambiguous.
Do any of the systems that you're
I was
looking
thinking,
at?
Melissa.
Have the ability
Accommodate
to
this?
grant permission for a field trip?
Or
Yeah.
to do electronic payments, so you don't have
Like
to
when
send a
you go to
check
jump
to.
on in.
They don't have they don't have electronic payments built into the system, but they partner with third parties that,
It's not payment though. We're looking.
But we
do
have
you-
I have 2
electronic
questions,
payment.
permission and
Payment
second
and
payment,
We have electronic payment.
We do it for athletics.
but not for field
Not
trip.
not for a lot of things, though.
Right.
A lot of things are go see Amy Smack.
so some of them do have
That's-
partners, so they link up.
That would be a big,
The permission slip piece, that was not something we explored.
Because I
Across the
believe
line.
there's a whole bunch of permissions I signed up at high school online for various things. And it'd be great if we could.
Well, let's not digress. I think that's worthy to
well,
do.
while you're looking at your
But let's just make the policy enable that, please.
So once again, the district must
Yeah.
receive
Yeah.
signed permission for each student participating, each student
To participate.
for each student to participate in each trip.
Yes.
in each trip. Well, I think it's.
We don't wanna blanket.
No, but I think sometimes like with 8th grade, when we have a number of trips and
I think-
permission slip that covers.
We won't
Okay.
we won't go too far after this.
Okay.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion to approve that policy with that last sentence
Second.
change.
So moved.
All,
So he,
Second
I
before it's
entertained, so he said, I'll entertain a moment, I said, so you second.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
And then, any further discussion?
Couldn't get it with us.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We now go to the overnight section of the school trips.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve the out-of-state overnight trip policy. We're supposed to make the motion first and then.
Oh, is that right? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Any second on that?
Second.
Okay. Now we can begin discussion. Thank you. My recollection is that we did sort of cobble together again the Carlisle version of the policy with the now shorter MASC student late night or overnight travel policy. We didn't use all of that latter policy, but we mostly used the Carlisle version. It's a little bit granular. I don't know if this one is quite a bit more granular.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, do we want all that stuff in there? I can't remember where we came down on. I mean, the only reason I can think of to make it so granular is that we, the committee, have to, it's not just a policy that's out there, we actually have to approve the trip, and so
Oh, I see. So
we
it's
should
logistical.
specify what
Yeah.
we need
Oh,
so that it's clear what we're approving.
that makes sense.
That's all I have.
So you're saying this is a significant change from the previous policy?
No, it's not. It's actually pretty much, it's,
So we good to vote?
I'm good to
Or-
vote.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that one carries. Very good. And now we go to the,
Our pace of approval picked up
It did.
over the year. Over the year.
yeah. Okay, so now the disability one. Did we make any changes to the? No, so this is the same as it's always been?
Just the question whether we needed a policy.
That was Josh's question, right?
I'll make a motion to approve the non-discrimination policy as printed in our packet.
Second.
Second. I second it.
Discussion?
Before it's first.
I think you're right, Jim, and there was a question, do we need it? And I think you came down and said,
Yes.
belt and suspenders is good to have, right? So, I have no further comments. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries.
Nice.
Very good, okay. While we're voting, would anybody like to make a motion to vote the technology discard, to approve the technology discard list, with the understanding that the first step is to see if the town could use some of the equipment?
My understanding is that we move to declare the equipment surplus, which then gives it back to the town.
Oh.
And then the town can pick at it if they want. And then I've asked in the past that we not simply discard it, but that we try to maximize value out of it
Right.
by taking bids for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me.
So I move that we follow that process for the attached the items in the, actually, first, I move that we waive our regular practice of bringing up a matter at one meeting and voting on it at the same meeting in order to expeditiously affect the surplus of these items.
Very good.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
I now move that we follow our regular process of surplusing equipment, the list in the packet, such that the town will have opportunity to use this equipment elsewhere, and should they not choose to, that the district take all steps to maximize the value to the district of this equipment.
Second.
Discussion? All in
Not for
favor?
me.
Aye. Thank
Very
you,
good.
Josh.
Okay, excellent. Warrants. Susan is no here.
Left
so-
building. Want me to read them?
Yes, please.
Okay, there's payroll warrant number 6018 for $354,576.82. Accounts payable warrant 6218 for $45,394.58. And accounts payable warrant 6518 for $144,179.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Other business? Any other business? Citizens' comments? No citizens' comments. Do I move that?
I move that we adjourn to executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38A, Section 21A, with no intent to return to open session for purpose 3 of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, which I believe that it would. And purpose 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Mass General Law, Chapter 39, 23B, 1 through 7, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22G, consideration of approval of executive session minutes from previous meetings.
I second.
McMorrow, aye.
Modell, aye.
We don't discuss it?
Would you like to?
I wanted to ask what happened to purpose A.
Not important.
No,
Yeah, good thing.
it's a mystery.
Kablotsky, aye.
Lear, I see.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.